Hello, and welcome to the Freaky Sideshow channel, where we try to crack some mysteries of the paranormal, ghosts, cryptids, near-death experiences, and flying saucers. Today, we're going to take a crack at solving the crop circle mystery. So if I can just get into sharing the screen here. Okay, this is a presentation on the crop circle mystery. My name is Russ Brinegar. I'm an author and an NDE experiencer. In the 1950s, from what we know from the Carson family in Wiltshire, England, they owned the biggest farm where simple single crop circles first started to show up. Will Carson, Shirley Carson, Tim Carson, they all report that over time, the formation since the 1950s became more and more complex. Started out as real simple circles, and coincidentally, at the same time in the 1950s, the flying saucer phenomenon took off at the same time. And in the 1950s, the saucers that people were reporting were dull or shiny metallic discs, especially about typically 30 feet in diameter, had thousands of witnesses all over the world. Following the single circle crop circles from the 50s, mostly in Wiltshire, England, although it's a worldwide phenomenon, the circles began as simple one circles, then they went to two, and over time they became more complicated, several circles. Then they started into the designs, and they got eventually pretty complex. Um, 40 years after the crop circle phenomena started in Wiltshire, these two yahoos, Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, confessed to making over 200 crop circles with boards and ropes. Their efforts were actually inspired by a 1966 account near Tully, Queensland, Australia, that left behind a depressed area of reeds. Now, entered Dr. Eltjo Hasselhoff. He determined that the crop circles that have node elongation measurements from the center of the formation to the perimeter that conform to the Beer-Lambert law of electromagnetism were in fact created by an unknown point source of EM radiation. His peer-reviewed results were published in the scientific journal Physiologia Plantarum in 2004. And because you can calculate just how high above the ground this point source of radiation was, it sort of eliminates the idea that I hear some people saying that these are created by satellites in near space from the US military. The node elongation created by internal heat. This causes the plants to fall over instead of breaking, as with the human created crop circles. So it's fairly easy to tell if the stalks are broken, then somebody got out there with a GPS and a laser or boards and ropes or whatever. But if you see the node elongation measurements from circle center to perimeter, and these measurements calculate and conform to the Beer-Lambert law of electromagnetism, then you're looking at the real deal. Some of the crops are exposed to such irradiated heat that there's actually node expulsion openings where the internal heat escaped. So human-made crop circles display stalks that are bent with boards. Crop circles are created by a point source of radiation, and they display elongated nodes or actual expulsion cavities from internal heat, causing the nodes to burst. Now, the interesting thing about the human-made crop formations, and there's a lot of them out there that were made by humans, is that multiple reports from human circle makers working at night is that they witness luminous orbs in the sky as if the UFO intelligences are working with them. So the intelligences behind the crop circles may actually be working with the human circle makers. And of course, there's always hucksters. In the UFO phenomenon and the crop circle mystery, there's hucksters and profiteers. In 2001, there was an apparent reply to an Arecibo message that the Earth sent into space in 1974. The top portion are formulas for sugars and bases of nucleotides of DNA. Then the middle section depicted the number of nucleotides in human DNA. And then the bottom portion reveals DNA differences between humans and a short, large headed alien species. And the trademark of the crop circles that are really propose a mystery is that there's no footprints, there's no, they're done at night and there's no tire tracks or footprints. So how these are done has always been puzzling. In 2002, Chilbolton, Stockbridge, United Kingdom was an interesting face that you could only see from the air. In 2002, Crabwood Crop Circle, United Kingdom, there was a gray alien face with a digital message, and they decoded the binary message. It said, "Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. There is good out there. We oppose deception. Conduit closing." Now, Barbara Lamb is one of my favorite crop circle researchers. She personally visited crop circle formations in England for 27 years. And Barbara gives an excellent presentation on human consciousness and crop circles at the annual Ozark UFO convention via the internet. And her presentation is on YouTube. So I'd recommend listening to her. 2009, Leonardo da Vinci Vitruvian Man popped up in the Netherlands. Again, in 2009, there was a squid-like crop circle. 2011, Windmill Hill looked like a spirograph. So what we see is that over time, they're getting more and more complex, just like the UFO phenomenon. Fractals started showing up in the more recent crop circles. Now, fractals are infinitely complex, never-ending patterns that are self-similar across different scales, small and large. The Mandelbrot set has shown up in crop formations. This is a set of complex numbers represented by C, in which the calculus function C times Z equals Z squared plus C does not diverge into infinity from Z equals 0. I know it's all complicated and I don't completely understand it myself, but it was first defined and drawn by Robert W. Brooks and Peter Metelsky in 1978. So these are highly detailed crop formations that show the Mandelbrot set. And there's also the Julia set that occasionally shows up. This is a calculus function, J times F, named after Gaston Julia, whose work began the study of complex dynamics in the early 19th century. So just as the flying saucers from the 1950s to the 1970s started out as these flying discs that looked like two saucers placed on top of one another, sometimes they had a cupola on the top, allegedly where the UFO knots ride. Today, modern UAP sightings are very different. They went from clunky tin can flying saucers of the 1950s to the 1970s to fantastic light shifts and shape-shifting luminous orbs. So the presentation of the crop formations, as well as the UFO presentations that people are reporting witnessing, are getting more and more complex over time. Now, this is where it gets weird. The key to understanding the crop circle mystery begins with this man. His name is Winston Bostick, 1916 to 1991. Now, Winston discovered plasmoids, plasma focus, and plasma vortex phenomena. When individual plasmoids are shot from a plasma gun into a solid object, they pass right through the material as if it wasn't there. This really surprised him. When multiple plasmoids are ejected, they appear to intelligently arrange themselves into spirals, just like the spiral galaxies that we observe in outer space. During the 60s and 70s, there was an arch UFO skeptic named Philip Klass. He was usually referred to as a UFO debunker, 1919 to 2005. And he was an arch skeptic of the UFO phenomena during the 60s through 2005 when he died. Klass did not believe we were being visited by extraterrestrials from another planet. class believed that the UFO phenomenon was a misunderstood plasma phenomenon. And as it turns out, much to his credit, I believe he was correct. Terence McKenna offers his insight. Now, Terence McKenna is an interesting psychonaut. He does psychedelics and reports his experiences 1946 to 2000. And he famously said UFOs are disguising themselves as spaceships visiting from another planet so as not to freak us out. In other words, the underlying intelligences behind the UFO phenomenon are more bizarre than just people coming from another planet to visit Earth. Dr. Jacques Vallée, in a YouTube lecture entitled The Theory of Everything, Dr. Vallée revealed his conclusions that beyond physical reality lies a metaphysical realm of informational structures. Actually has to go back 13.5 billion years to the event that physicists call the Big Bang. And what started out the universe was a quark gluon plasma. Now, this is still exists, and the physicists are saying that 99% to 99.9% of this universe that we're all embedded in is plasma, mostly invisible to humans. The material universe is just like the tip of the iceberg to a much larger reality. And this is also referred to as dark matter. So our universe is mostly dark matter, imperceptible, and apparently inhabited by plasma beings, intelligences that are made like the legend of the Jinn, who were allegedly made out of smokeless fire. The Earth itself is not as it seems. It's not just a solid core. We actually live in a plasmosphere, and this plasmosphere is like a Tootsie Pop with the hard center, but this is all considered Earth. It's got the hardcore center and the plasmosphere surrounding it. Recently confirmed from a German astronomer long ago is something called the Kordylewski clouds. Now, these are L4, L5 Lagrange points between the Earth and the Moon, and these are collections of plasma. And plasma is non-atomic matter, incomplete matter, made of protons, neutrons, and ions. So we have a plasma sun. 99% of the universe is plasma made up of incomplete atoms, electrons, protons, ions, non-atomic matter, most of which is invisible to human perceptions. Now, what they're calling solar wind, Winston Bostick and others project are actually plasmoids that seem to have an intelligence of their own. And they're coming here from the sun and entering into Earth's plasmosphere and interacting with the life. Some believe these plasmoids have something to do with the evolution of life on the planet. But going back to Winston Bostick shooting a plasmoid at a copper plate and it going right through it like it's nothing. We've all heard of UFO going through mountains or entering volcanoes. And if an intelligent plasmoid came from the sun to the Earth, it could pass right through the Earth. And to the people on the other side of the Earth, it would appear that these luminous orbs are coming up out of the ground when it actually came from the other direction and just passed straight through the Earth. Robert Temple, the man that made the Sirius mystery book, 2022, hot off the press, A New Science of Heaven. He talks about all this, that we live in a plasma universe and it's likely inhabited by intelligent plasma or light beings. This also coordinates pretty well with the body of channeled material that I particularly like, the raw material, the Law of One. It's a body of channeled material by Carla Ruckert in 1981. And in this material, it states that every one of us have a sixth density higher self that exists in what humans call the distant future. And it also states that the sun is actually inhabited by sixth density light beings. So I love it when little data points can connect like that. Tesla believed that there were invisible intelligences all around us, and he actually received downloads of color blueprints that would rotate 360 degrees right in front of his eyes. He never even had to test any of his stuff because he knew exactly how it was built and how to do it. So, human evolution is the gradual expansion of consciousness from limited personal awareness to identification with the vast indwelling soul. And it really makes me wonder what the future of the crop circle formations, if we're jumping from fractals, the Julia set, the Mandelbrot set, to what is going to be next as human consciousness evolves past the present. This will continue to become more complex, and the phenomenon seems to be wanting more and more people to pay attention to it. It's in some way guiding human consciousness in an ever evolving pattern. And the same thing goes for UFO sightings. What will be the next generation of UFO sightings? We've gone from the 50s to the clunky tin can. Looks like somebody threw a automobile hub into the air, and sometimes they were. There's a lot of hucksters in ufology, a lot of profiteers and hucksters, and that's always been a part of the phenomena. It's almost like this part of the phenomena is allowed to exist so that the real phenomena can do its thing and the right people will pay attention to it. So I fully expect the crop circle mystery and the UFO mystery to take a giant step forward. And this may have something to do, in my opinion, with the coming singularity. Edgar Casey talked about an Atlantean technology called the Firestone that would allow humans living in three-dimensional reality to talk to what we call the other side. Now, this plasma universe or the dark matter universe likely is what we refer to as the spiritual world. More information can be found in the book that I wrote from my own personal experiences called Overlords of the Singularity, the Manipulation of Humankind by Hidden UFO Intelligences and the Quest for Transcendence. It's on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. It details a near-death experience that I experienced in 2009 that prompted research into the paranormal. It examines classic cases and all the theories of the UFO phenomenon. So I appreciate your time and appreciate you listening to me, and come back to the Freaky Sideshow channel for more good stuff.